we're going to constantly talk about this today. It doesn't have to be tens of hours, but it does have to be concrete enough that it gives you enough of an action plan and a to-do list related to your international activities. And the reality is that a lot of the export plan comes from the business plan. So how many people have a fully functioning business plan that they've updated in the last 6 months? All right. So now the export plan becomes even more important because now the export plan is going to feed back into a business plan. So does it have to be super complex and multiple? Well, if you're presenting to a bank and trying to get $100,000 worth of financing, yes, it does have to be very clear and very concise. But anything less than that, it can just be a single page, a couple of slides. My business plan is 4 slides, and it really is fairly straightforward. Make sure I can do certain things, make sure I have capacity, make sure that I can deliver these services in a certain way, and make sure I can finance them. But if you're going to be looking at different markets, then the export plan becomes that much more important. So the purposes of an export plan are really to put down on paper or put down in a structured format what it is that you're trying to do. And it really is about, what am I really good at? What is it that I'm going to sell? So it might be you want to sell a piece of content that has 6 episodes and you want to sell that into at least 2 markets. All right, now we have to understand where those are going to sell well. We identify the markets they're going to sell into. Start with 1 or 2. We don't have to do 100. We can actually start. The good news is that if your content plays well in 20 markets, numbers 3 through 20 will be easier to implement because you've already gone through the first 2. But don't overwhelm both your staff as well as yourself with the idea that you have to target 20 markets. You have to know that you might be capable of selling content in those markets, but you don't have to have an export plan that specifically says, how am I going to sell and market in France and Germany and the UK and Australia? Just pick a couple and actually have it as part of it. Make sure that you have the action plan, that you've got an understanding of what has to change on the marketing front. These are all things that should go into an electronic version of an export plan that actually then allows you to go back to it and continually refine it. Because what's going to happen is that you're going to get to some point and say, redo website. Then you try to redo the website and it's $15,000 and you go, can't redo website. So now how are we going to overcome that? Well, maybe we spend $1,000 on updating 4 pages and making sure that they're the ones that are focused on the international market. It doesn't have to be completely perfect, but it does have to be focused. And it has to be clean. And we'll talk a lot about best practices around websites a little later. And then you'll start to see what parts of your website you might have to update if you're going to go into international markets. But fundamentally, the export plan is really about the action items that are going to be required that I have to change, deal with, or improve in the next 2 or 3 months before I start knocking on doors in that particular market. Hopefully, the answer is also going to be, it's not going to cost me more than a certain amount of money. It's actually going to be easy to change that. It's going to be harder to do that. I'm going to have to hire somebody new to do this over there. Well, obviously, the bigger challenge is the one you start working on the soonest. And then the smaller challenges are ones that just get updated over time. Best practices. Have a business plan. So we already covered off on that one. But take your export plan, turn it into a business plan, whatever that mixture is. The business plan is really how you run your company and how you pay for things and how you get the resources that are required to make certain parts of your company run better. The export plan is taking that product and then targeting it and marketing it in a different market. So they're 2 different things, but they're all part of the same comprehensive whole if necessary. As we said, prioritization. Make sure that you have identified the stuff that takes the longest and takes the most money and start putting that in place. Put it into, I guess, the financial plan because you have to pay for it at some point. And then eventually it will be in place and ready to go when you are ready to go. Don't wait until the last minute because obviously that's 3 or 4 times the cost. Work with a coach. So CMPA has a lot of very talented people within the organization that have done this before and have been successful or have gone through training or have access to consultants or other resources. A fantastic resource is the Trade Commissioner Service from Global Affairs Canada. You're talking about creative specialists in the top 20 markets that you're going to focus on who are going to be able to answer some basic questions and maybe even look at your content and go, okay, no, you can go sell it in the UK or you can go sell it, into Australia, but that's not going to work in this particular market. And they may even speak the language. I used a trade commissioner service in Japan to set up meetings and try to teach me the right way to go in that particular market, just because you had to have somebody that understood culture, nuance, help me negotiate contracts in Japanese, 65-page contracts in Japanese. If I tried to do that on my own or even with a translator, that would have been a disaster. Whereas the trade commissioner was incredible. And he just knew how to do everything. He also slapped me sometimes in the back of the head and said, don't do that. What are you doing? You're insulting people. Stop that. And so they're a fantastic resource for everything from coaching to even working, or at least pointing to subcontractors, consultants, or resources that can help you prepare or to even help you adjust or alter some of your content, because they've got those contacts in market. They're in I'll call it a Rolodex. It's a good old-fashioned term. But the reality is they know somebody that's going to be able to help you. And most important, keep it simple. Even your value statement, even the way you describe your company, the way you describe your product, the way you describe the value of your product, you have to keep it simple. One, if it's being pitched to anybody that's going to give you money, it has to be super simple. Secondly, if it's being pitched to anybody who speaks English as a second language or even a third language, it has to be simple. It's nothing worse than having them just sit there and it just goes straight over their heads. And they're polite, and they'll always say to you, thank you, oh wow, that was really amazing. They have no clue what it is you just tried to pitch them. And that's disappointing because, again, investment in time, investment in money, and investment in basically not being able to achieve what you want to achieve.